I'll begin this afternoon's session with a brief introduction. Welcome to the Canadian Institute of Forestry's National Electronic Lecture Program. My name is Sharon Young, and I will be hosting today's session. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024, and this is the first session in the e-lecture series featuring graduate student research. For today's session, we are pleased to have Surabhi Lukose, who will give an exciting presentation titled Mixing Tree Species and Density Management to Reduce Drought Susceptibility in Coastal Plantation Forests of British Columbia. To kick things off, Surabhi is a passionate forester who has shown her interest towards forestry by working in diverse fields like silviculture, agroforestry, forest management, and forest certification. She earned her undergrad degree in forestry from Kerala Agricultural University in India, and she recently completed her master's degree in forestry from the University of Alberta. Along with the British Columbia Ministry of Forests, as part of her master's degree, she looked at species mixture and density management to moderate drought effects in the coastal forests of British Columbia. She has presented her research findings at various conferences across Canada and USA, and she will be presenting her research work as part of this e-lecture series as well. With that, I will now pass it over to Surabhi.
Hello. I'm audible, I guess, right?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon, for the introduction, and I'll right away move to my presentation. So I'll be talking on mixing tree species along with density management to reduce drought susceptibility in coastal plantation forests of British Columbia. Okay, so as we all know that forests play a vital role in the health, stability, and well-being of our planet by providing us with essential environmental and ecosystem services. Canada's forests are important to the economy, livelihood, recreation, as well as employment. Canada has 9% of the world's forest, with 362 million hectares, making it the third most forested country in the world. However, however, with the increasing climate change and other economic crises that's happening across the world, forests have been facing a lot of issues in the previous many years. So some of the issues that the country's forest has been facing as a result of climate change is that forest fires, droughts, windstorm, as well as insect attack. So these disturbances, they not only destroy the trees, as well as they also alter the physiology, they alter the nutrient cycling, they make the tree susceptible to diseases, which eventually reduce the tree growth and increases tree mortality. As a result of the increased death in the number of trees, there's a lot of biodiversity loss as well as aesthetic losses. So all these, in short, destroy the trees, which damage our forests, and in short, it leads to more of desertification and dryness in the and will lead to those kind of stuff in the upcoming years. So this study was conducted in the province of British Columbia, and drought is an important natural hazard as a result of climate change that we will be discussing on. So drought is an important natural hazard in North America, and climate change is considered as a key driver of the historic dry conditions. Drought results in prolonged periods of reduced precipitation, and drought-stressed forests are further susceptible to get damaged by insects and diseases. So looking across all the provinces of Canada, you can see that the provinces of Alberta and British Columbia are extremely vulnerable to drought. So as a result of the drought in these provinces, a study was conducted along with the Ministry of British Columbia to compare and contrast the potential of a Douglas-fir Western red cedar plantation in moderating the effects of drought across different combinations of densities and mixtures. So our study site was located in the province of British Columbia. So particularly it was in the Vancouver Island. So we looked at the drought condition of Vancouver Island, and we can see that it falls in the region of moderately drought to severe drought conditioned area. And the reason for this, and it has been also predicted that in the next 20 years, drought would be increasing in this province. And the reason for that is the increase in annual temperature, as you can see in the graph. And the reason for this is again being climate change. So in order to mitigate droughts or to reduce the effects of drought in future in these forests, we came up with the study. So our study site, as already mentioned, is located in the Vancouver Island. It's particularly in the MacDonald Lake near Souk. And we have a Douglas-fir Western red cedar plantation, which was established already in the early spring of 1992. So talking about the important species, Douglas-fir and Western red cedar. Coastal Douglas-fir is an important timber species in Canada. It is a deep-rooting species as well as a fast-growing tree species, and is found immensely distributed across the province of British Columbia. The next tree, Western red cedar, is a slow-growing tree species, and it's a shade-tolerant compared to Douglas fir, which is a fast-growing tree species and a shade-intolerant species. And Western red cedar is also considered a stress-tolerant species, and it's seen to have shallow fibrous root systems. So this one is a mixed forest of Douglas fir and Western red cedar. So these huge ones are the Douglas fir trees, and the small ones are Western red cedar trees. So the reason for basically selecting these two tree species and mixing them is because of their different physiological characteristics, their different response to drought, and the differences in the growth rate. So that's how we establish a mixed species, and that's how we are going to look at this experiment. So our experimental site basically had 4 mixtures. That is okay, so we had basically 3 densities and 4 mixtures. So the 3 densities were at 1,500 stems per hectare, 1,000 stems per hectare, and 500 stems per hectare. And the 4 mixtures were FD stands for Douglas fir. So they were like pure stands of Douglas fir, pure stands of Western red cedar, 25% Douglas fir and 75% Western red cedar, and 50-50 of both Western red cedar and Douglas fir. So we had 2 sets of mixtures, 2 sets of pure species. So so basically we had 24 plots in total, and there were 2 replicates, and it was a 4×3 factorial design. So we had like basically for FD 100%, we had them at 1,500, 1,000, and 500. Similarly, CW 100% at 1,500, 1,000, and 500. So all these mixtures were planted at all 3 of these 3 densities, which made it up a total of 12 plots, and each of those had a replicate which contributed to 24 plots. So moving on to the methods and data collection. So the first thing that we did was we determined the drought years. So we used the standard precipitation evapotranspiration index. This is because the province of British Columbia, it doesn't show precipitation throughout the year. So the summers are dry and the winters have more precipitation. So basically we consider the dry summers as the drought period in the Vancouver Island. So that's why SPEI calculates its drought years over 12 months. We use the SPEI as to calculate. SPEI uses monthly difference between precipitation and potential evapotranspiration. So it can be calculated over 12 months, as well as 6 months, as well as 3 months. So we calculated it over 6 months. So it was like from April to September. So yeah, and the drought years, so it states that any SPI value less than minus 0.5 is considered as a drought year. So you can see these years with values less than minus 0.5. So in our case, we consider 2015 and 2016 as the drought years, and 2019 and 2020 as the wet years. Okay, so the first one is that we took soil moisture measurements, because soil moisture is an important parameter in defining drought as well as floods or anything related to dry conditions. So we use the TDR 350 soil moisture meter. So we for each plot we took we divided them into 9 subplots, and within each subplot we had one measurement at the center and 4 along each of the cardinal directions. And similarly we did it for all 9 subplots. And then once we got the value for all these subplots, we averaged them to get one soil moisture value per plot. So the next thing we did was tree ring analysis. So we collected tree cores, and we so for mixed stands, we collected two tree cores per tree, and for mixed species for mixed stands we cored 12 trees, and for pure stands we cored only 6 trees. So when it was 12 trees, this means like 6 of each particular species. So then we transfer the tree cores into plastic straws, and then once we brought it to the university, we first we air dried it, and then we oven dried it, and then we set them on tree core mounts, and then I sanded them. And this was like how fine they looked after sanding. And then I used a software called CDendro and QRecorder to mark the tree rings on it. So yeah, so after marking the tree rings, we calculated the tree drought indices. So I'll tell you how we calculated the drought indices. So first, we already had the tree radius, that is diameter at breast height divided by 2. So we took the diameter using a measuring tape. So if you consider this as a cross section of a tree, the pink one, it shows the tree radius. And then, okay, so so the tree radius minus the bark thickness will be I don't know why the screen not moving.
It is moving for me.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, so this is the tree radius, and this is the tree bark, the one in red. So that's your bark thickness. So what we did is first we had the tree radius, and then the tree radius minus the bark thickness is considered as the radius for the nth year. So basically we code the trees in the year 2022. So we were looking from outside from 2022 to 2021. So first we calculated the radius for the year 2022. So that was tree radius minus the bark thickness. And then we calculated the radius for the year 2021. That was the radius in 2022 minus the ring width for that particular year. So this was the ring width for this. So this will be a radius for 2021. That is the tree radius, radius for 2022 minus ring width. So each year, these ring width values you can get from the CDendro software. And then each year you minus the corresponding radiuses to get the radius of the n-1th year. So this is just a depiction of the ring width. And then we calculated the basal area using the formula pi r square, and then we calculated the basal area increment by subtracting the corresponding previous basal areas. So once we got the basal area, so we already mentioned our drought years and non-drought years. So the 3 laureate indices, drought resistance, recovery, and resilience, was calculated. So drought resistance is the ability of the tree to withstand drought. Drought recovery is the ability of the tree to recover back after a drought period. And resilience is the ability of the tree to regain all the traits that is lost during a drought period. And like when it gains it back, so it was termed as drought resilience. So these are the three laureate indices that we basically calculated using our tree ring values. So it's just a calculation on how we calculated it. So yeah. And then, so the first one was soil moisture, second one was tree ring, and the third one was carbon isotope. So I already mentioned that we collected 2 tree cores. We used 1 tree core for isotope analysis and 1 tree core for tree ring analysis. So moving on to why carbon isotope analysis was done is that the carbon exists in 2 forms as carbon-12 and carbon-13 in the atmosphere. Carbon-12 has 6 protons and neutrons, while carbon-13 has 6 protons and 7 neutrons, which makes it a heavier isotope compared to carbon-12. So what happens is that in a normal scenario, trees take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they convert it into carbon-12 and carbon-13 inside the plant cells. So during a normal scenario, the plant uses more of carbon-12 because it's a lighter isotope for its photosynthesis and other activities. So however, what happens during a stress condition or a drought condition is that the plant closes the stomata, and as a result of which there is like almost no intake of carbon dioxide. So the plant has to utilize all the stored carbon in it. So first the plant uses up all the carbon-12. So once the carbon-12 gets used up, it starts using up carbon-13. So when you look at the tree ring, also the isotope ratio of a plant which is drought stressed, you can see that its carbon-13 ratio is higher than compared to a plant which is growing in a normal condition. So that's why carbon isotope analysis are conducted. So we basically, what we get is the delta carbon-13 ratio. So this is the carbon-13 to 12 ratio of the tree. With respect to a standard value, the standard is considered as Vienna PD belemnite, which is a Cretaceous fossil. So it is used as a standard. So the delta carbon-13 value of that particular Vienna PD belemnite is used as a standard all over the world to calculate delta carbon-13. So that's how basically the concept of carbon isotope analysis comes into place. So what we did is that, so we collected tree cores, and so we already had the drought years 2019 and 2020. So I segregated that particular portion of the tree core, and then I did grind it so that like it became a fine powder form. And then like we put them into samples and we send them to the University of Toronto, where they get further analyzed it in their mass spectrometer, and they gave us the isotopic values. That is the delta carbon-13 values. Okay, so these were our methodology for data collection. So moving on to the data analysis, we used the linear mixed model ANOVA. Our predictors were density, mixture, and species. So we had 3 levels of density, 4 levels of mixture, and 2 species, as already mentioned. So the responses were soil moisture, drought resistance, resilience recovery, and carbon isotopic value during wet and dry years. So we used the Tukey HSD and linear regression and paired two sample t-tests for statistical analysis. Moving on to the results. Looking at the soil moisture, we saw that soil moisture decreased with increasing stand density, except for pure Douglas fir stands, which had least soil moisture among all mixtures, with soil moisture not varying across density. So we saw that the pure Douglas fir stands, they had the least soil moisture among all the mixtures. And then we also noticed that soil moisture decreases with increasing density, which means that if you plant your trees in a denser or with less spacing, there will be more competition compared to trees which are planted at more spacing. And we assume that Douglas fir, the reason for the low soil moisture in the pure Douglas fir stands, what we assume is that Douglas fir had a higher leaf area, so it uses up it takes up more water for transpiration as well as the life purposes of the tree. So that's why the reason it could be that Douglas fir uses up more water. So it has released soil moisture, the pure stance. So moving on to the next is the tree drought indices that we calculated were drought resistance, resilience, and recovery. So what we saw that, so we looked them at a stand level as well as the tree level. So first, looking at a stand level, we saw that trees growing at a lower basal area, they showed a higher drought resistance. And so in general, this was the observation, which means that at a lower basal area, there are less number of trees, so there could be more resources available to a tree after drought to get back to its original state. And we also saw that western red cedar trees in their pure stance had higher drought resistance than Douglas fir trees in their pure stance. So maybe because compared to Douglas fir, western red cedar trees are small, like they can easily use up resources compared to Douglas fir trees. So that could be a reason. And similar observation was seen for drought resilience as well as drought recovery. So basically, all the three drought indices showed the similar result that at lower basal area, trees had higher drought resistance, higher drought resilience, as well as higher drought recovery. Apart from looking at it as a stand level, we also looked at the drought indices of individual trees, that is of Douglas fir and western red cedar individually. So for looking at a tree level, we consider tree height as a parameter because several studies have shown that with increasing tree height, the tree uses up more water and it is more prone to drought, etc. I think someone raised hands, so should I stop in between or is it the question session is towards the end?
I guess we can leave the questions to the end, but if you can pause temporarily, I can actually give Alvaro the permission to talk. So just one moment.
Yeah, like I think I'm fine with it. Like somebody also asked, yeah.
Yeah,
go
let's
ahead.
do that.
Yes.
Alvaro, you can talk now. Maybe he's not quite ready.
Okay, that's okay. Like I can move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Let's keep going.
So yeah, okay. So it is often said that trees with higher tree height, they use up more water, so they are more prone to drought. So that's why we looked at the individual tree level as well. So we collected tree height of the trees, but however, for our study, we did not see that there was any significant difference for tree height between Douglas fir or western red cedar. So kind of the trees, so considering tree height, the trees, considering an individual tree characteristics, both the trees, there was not much significant difference, but on the stand level, there was a difference. That is why we saw that trees planted at lower basal areas, they had higher drought indices. So, from which we came up to a conclusion that drought tolerance in these particular stands were more influenced by stand level characteristics and not by tree level characteristics. So another thing is like using the delta carbon 13 values, we calculated the water use efficiency. So it is again a mathematical equation which gives you the water use efficiency. So so this shows that as less negative value shows an increasing water use efficiency. So these are the delta carbon 13 values. So what we saw that we calculated the water use efficiency during both dry and wet years. So this diagram on the left side is for Douglas fir, while the right side is for western red cedar, and we saw that western red cedar trees showed a higher difference in water use efficiency between the wet and dry years across the mixtures, while for Douglas fir, the difference was quite stable. So this also made us came on to the conclusion that western red cedar trees are considered more responsive to drought compared to Douglas fir trees. And western red cedar trees in their pure stands had higher water use efficiency than Douglas fir trees in their pure stands, so they were better able to efficiently utilize water during a drought period. So, well, also, western red cedar trees at lower basal area showed a higher water use efficiency, which means that basal area also affects water use efficiency. So, moving on to the final takeaway from the results of my study is that if you have trees planted at higher basal area, they have lower soil moisture, they have lower drought indices, and they have lower water use efficiency. However, which leads them a lower drought tolerance of those stands. However, if you plant them at a lower basal area, there is higher soil moisture in those stands, higher drought indices, and higher water use efficiency. And these trees are highly tolerant to drought. So the reason being the high drought tolerance of the low basal area stands, as already mentioned, is their lesser competition, more efficient utilization of resources between the trees. And two ways by which we can reach a higher drought tolerance in these stands is by mixing tree species as well as controlling density. So when you control density, there's you increase the spacing, while in mixtures there are two species, like two different tree species. So there's like they can better efficiently utilize the resources. So yeah, that's it. So I would like to acknowledge Dr. Brad Pino, who was my supervisor for this study from the University of Alberta, Dr. Pedro Mary, who was my co-supervisor from the Ministry of British Columbia, and the British Columbia Ministry of Forests for funding my research, and my field crews, Stefania, Fanny, and Jim, and the Isotope Laboratory at the University of Ottawa, and a bunch of postdocs, profs, colleagues from my University of Alberta, and my family and friends. And thank you, and I'm open to questions. I'm sorry I took a lot of time, but yeah.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Surabhi. That was a great presentation. Before we proceed to answer the questions, let's take a moment to fill out the post-webinar survey. Just one moment. So there are 2 questions in total. You may need to scroll down to see the second question. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A pod at this moment. Surabhi, let's give our participants a few more minutes if they have any questions. All right, if there are no questions at this moment, I would like to bring this session to a close. Surabhi, would you mind sharing your email address in the chat so that people can reach out to you if they have any questions later?
Sure, I'll just put it up.
Thank you. Oh, you just got a question, a last minute question.
Okay.
So for planting our future plantations, do you recommend planting to a lower density?
Yes, I do recommend planting at a lower density based on my study, yes.
All right. Thank you all for participating.
Then,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Surabhi.
Yeah, but I was just wondering, like, if the purpose of your plantation also matters. So if you are just planting it for like timber purposes, so I think at a lower density, you won't get enough benefits from the timber. So you can plant at a higher density, but you then necessarily have to manage the trees at regular intervals. So there is less competition and there's more efficient utilization of the resources and the trees get to grow good. However, but if your long-term aim is like protection of the ecosystem or something like that, I would recommend lower density plantations because then you won't be going every time to have a look at it. Like they will be like under low maintenance. So it actually depends on your purpose.
Thank you, Surabhi. Here's another question for you. Can you expand on the cultural or aesthetic considerations impacting the choice of mixed tree species in urban settings?
Okay, can I just have a look at the question once again? Yeah. Could you just read it out to me?
Sure. So the question is, can you expand on the cultural or aesthetic considerations impacting the choice of mixed tree species in urban settings?
So question aesthetic, right? Okay, so moving on to urban settings, I again think that depends on your purpose. So if you are just looking for shade tolerance, so definitely you would want to consider a tree which like a particular species is shade tolerant and you would want to like plant it aesthetically across. So but if you are looking at considering like a plant, like setting up a park or something, you would want a mixed plantation to like increase the aesthetic value of that park. So again, it depends on the purpose, but definitely if you are planting mixed species, there would be less competition on a long term. So I would go and recommend planting mixed species because again in urban settings you're not going to cut down the tree regularly, right? It will be in a set for many years. So mixed trees would again be beneficial in those areas. Yeah.
Thank you, Surabhi.
Okay.
I think we also have one question in the chat, so I'll read out for you. First, it's a comment from Brian, and he said, "Thank you, Surabhi, for a great talk on a well-designed experiment. Not all studies can address this question." I agree.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. Okay.
And here's the question. Since 1992, how much mortality was evident in this trail by species?
Okay, so I'm so sorry. We didn't look particularly into the mortality part, so I don't have a strong answer for that. But like when we had a site visit, like I did look at the mortality. So yeah, there were trees of red cedar which were dead, but then again, I don't know, like I didn't look into all plots, so I will have to collect the data from the BC Ministry for that. I'm sorry about that.
No worries, Surabhi.
Yeah,
and I think our participant wants to know, where will you or have you already published this work?
Okay, so no, the work is with a journal, like it's with CGFR under review. So it's like I gave it to them, so it's under review. It's been like just 2 months, so it's still under review. Yeah.
So we'll stay tuned.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
All right. If there are no more questions, I would like to bring this session to a close. Thank you all for participating in our CIF electronic lectures. And once again, thank you very much to Surabhi for the great presentation. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Sharon. Bye.